Welcome to the debut episode of the UFL Tribune, Episode 1. I am your host. I go by many names online. You can just call me Christopher, my actual name. You might also know me as on Twitter as Baz0Bo0. That is spelled B-A-0-B-O-0. You might also know me as that guy with the unhealthy obsession with Case Cookus online. But no matter where you know me, I'm hosting this podcast too now. I'm not going to bloat this episode's length too much, so I'm just going to try and hop straight into some actual UFL information. I'll start with some free agency moves. And this one happened today. Well, today being the day I recorded this. This might come out tomorrow, so it just happened. AJ McCarron returning to the St. Louis Battlehawks. Now, that is big for multiple parties involved in this whole thing. One, big for the Battlehawks, because they have their, franchise quarterback back. I don't know if you want to call him that, but, face of the franchise last year, best player on the team, no doubt. So, big for them, because if AJ didn't come back, then they would have been in a really weird quarterback situation, and they probably would have ended up starting Brandon Silvers, because they did sign Brandon Silvers, quarterback for the Houston Roughnecks in the XFL last year, right before AJ McCarron decided to come back. Brandon Silvers, by the way, went 6-2 with Houston last year, but not coming back to the Roughnecks. Well, the Roughnecks he played for no longer exist, but not going back to the new Roughnecks that are actually the Gamblers either. But yeah. So AJ McCarron returning to the Battlehawks, big for the Battlehawks, and it's also big for the UFL in general, in my opinion, considering AJ McCarron does bring a lot of attention to the league. Like, people see AJ McCarron is playing in the UFL, that'll get more fans, right? Former Alabama fans want to see AJ McCarron play. They might tune into a couple Battlehawks games this season, which I know that did happen last year. I remember around last year, right around when the XFL season started in 2023, I was scrolling through YouTube, and I saw a video called The XFL is Crazy, and it was literally just a guy in Alabama fan, talking about, he was talking about the ending of the 2023 Week 1 XFL game between the San Antonio Brahmas and St. Louis Battlehawks, which, if you don't remember, the Battlehawks had an insane comeback in the last minute and a half of the game because of the XFL's, rules that allow that to happen a lot more commonly. And he said he was watching the game because he wanted to see AJ McCarron get some throws in, because he was a former Alabama player. And, he didn't get much playing time in the NFL. When he did play in the NFL, he was mediocre at best. So he wanted to see AJ McCarron play. And yeah, he actually had interest in the XFL with AJ McCarron playing last year. So AJ McCarron coming back is going to bring some extra interest to the league. And that's pretty good. That's good for the league, good for the Battlehawks, good for the AJ McCarron himself. People will get to see him play. He signed with the XFL last year so his kids could see him play. And that's going to happen again. His kids won't be able to watch AJ McCarron play football once again. So yeah, that's one of our free agency signings. In the same vein as that AJ McCarron signing, kinda, different position entirely, but same kind of argument I'm making here. Donald, I think you pronounce his last name, DeLay, also known as Destroying, signing to be the kicker of the San Antonio Brahmas. That one happened a couple weeks ago, but I feel like I should put it in with the AJ McCarron one, because I can make it around the same argument. Because I've seen way more Brahmas fans pop up, just from non-previous UFL fans, because they were Destroying fans, and, the Brahmas signed Destroying. So, a lot of Destroying fans showed interest in the UFL to root for the San Antonio Brahmas, which there might be a little disappointed with the UFL's PAT rules and stuff. Kickers don't get nearly as much playing time in the UFL as they would have in the USFL last year, for example. But I'm getting off topic. I'm planning on talking about the rules later in the show, so we'll get there when we get there. But back to quarterbacks, I also wanted to talk about Jordan Ta'amu did indeed re-sign with the DC Defenders, and that's big for DC too, because, once again, I wouldn't say he was the best player on the Defenders. I'd say that goes to Abram Smith, personally. But Jordan Ta'amu, when he was playing at his best, was, I think, better than AJ McCarron when Jordan Ta'amu was playing at his best. I don't know if that's a hot take or not. I'm also a Defenders fan, so I may be biased. But when Jordan Ta'amu was playing at his max potential, I think he played better than AJ McCarron did in the XFL last season. It's just, Jordan Ta'amu had a thing where, it would take him a bit to actually get in the rhythm of things. Like, he was not really a very productive quarterback the first, 3 weeks of the season. Then he kind of got in the groove of, he's kind of working now. He's understanding the offense. It kind of fell apart because he went back to the first 3 weeks of the season, Jordan Ta'amu, in, the first half of the championship. Defenders ended up losing. But if Jordan Ta'amu can get things going and, stay at his top playing potential level, the defenders are going to be really good. Defenders are going to be really good, even if Jordan Ta'amu doesn't play perfectly, as we saw last year. But, yeah, Jordan Ta'amu coming back to the defenders is really big for the team because De'Aaron King is also notable because De'Aaron King did not return to the defenders. Jordan Ta'amu's backup, who also played pretty good in the times he had to go in. So if De'Aaron King not coming back, Jordan Ta'amu coming back becomes even bigger than it would have been beforehand. Backing off quarterbacks for a second, though, Frank Gidna has re-signed to the Michigan Panthers. If you weren't paying attention to the USFL last season, Frank Gidna is the reigning 2023 USFL Defensive Player of the Year, and I guess also the last 2023 USFL Defensive Player of the Year, because the USFL is not a thing anymore. But Frank Gidna had 3 interceptions, 104 tackles, and a sack. So he was really good on the defensive side of the ball. That was second tied for second for interceptions in the USFL last season. So he's much more of a pass defense guy than a rushing defense guy. His one sack isn't really screaming at you off the charts. But, so big move for the Panthers, bringing Frank Gidna back. Now, I have one more quick free agency move I want to talk about, and I'm referring to the Birmingham Stallions. The Birmingham Stallions have signed Matt Corral to their roster, which he probably, honestly, will not end up playing in the UFL, if you want my opinion. I think J'Mar Smith is still the starter in Birmingham, but it is a little interesting because the Birmingham Stallions quarterback room is probably one of the deepest in the UFL at the moment. They have J'Mar Smith, Matt Corral, and Adrian Martinez. I don't know if Skip Holtz is intending on running something like the 2-quarterback system Mike Riley had with the Generals in 2022. Hell, 3-quarterback system for the Stallions this year? I don't know, but their quarterback room is just stacked off the charts. I still think J'Mar Smith will be the starter, but if he gets hurt again, I feel like Matt Corral is going to be really good. He was really good in college. I don't actually watch that much college football. I'm more of a professional football guy, but, Matt Corral was really good in college, was drafted by the Panthers, the Carolina Panthers, not the Michigan Panthers, but drafted by the Panthers in the 3rd round back in 2022. So, he's got some talent. Never ended up starting in the NFL, though. So, if J'Mar Smith happens to go down, I feel like the Stallions do have a really good backup for J'Mar Smith. If Matt Corral goes down, the Stallions still have a really good 3rd stringer in Adrian Martinez, from what I've heard. Haven't actually seen any of his tape, but people seem to be hyping it up a lot. I'm just being honest with that one, okay? I did not research Adrian Martinez tape before this. I know, sue me. But, that's pretty much all the free agency moves I wanted to talk about. So, let's get into the second thing I want to talk about this season, the UFL's rules. So, the first rule in the UFL this season I want to talk about is the PAT rules. If you are unaware, they have taken the XFL PAT rules from last season, and they will be using the XFL this season. If you don't know, you can go for a 1-point conversion after you score a touchdown from the 2-yard line, a 2-point conversion from the 5-yard line, or a 3-point conversion from the 10-yard line. And you can run any play you want. It's just like a conversion in the actual NFL, but, from different yards and for different amounts of points and stuff. Yeah. Now, personally, I'm not a big fan of the XFL's PAT rules. I would have much preferred the USFL's PAT rules because, I briefly talked about it with talking about destroying earlier, but we can't really get kickers tape that much if we just don't let them kick extra points. We saw Brandon Aubrey for the Cowboys this NFL season. He played in the USFL for the Stallions. And, even as an Eagles fan, Brandon Aubrey was a really good kicker. So, we don't really know. Kickers are not going to have nearly as many opportunities to show how good they are at kicking if they don't ever have to kick extra points. In the XFL last year, I'm a Defenders fan. I couldn't even tell you who our kicker was last year. 1, because our offense was really good and we scored a lot of touchdowns. And 2, there was no extra points. So even when we did score touchdowns, I still had no idea who our kicker was because we never really saw our kicker that much. So, Personally, I think they should have stuck with the USFL PAT rules, or which were literally just the NFL PAT rules, plus the 3-point conversion try if you wanted to do it. I think those were better, because, yeah, with these rules, we kickers can't show how good they are nearly as often. So that's my take on the PAT rules for the UFL. Not a fan. The next rule I want to talk about is the kickoffs, and the UFL kickoffs will be taking the USFL kickoff format instead of the safety first XFL kickoffs we had beforehand in 2020 and 2023. Personally, I preferred the USFL kickoff just because, kind of like the same thing with the PAT rules, it's more similar to the NFL's kickoffs, right? So if we want to get tape for these people, try and get them their second chance in the NFL, or just a chance in the NFL at all, I feel like we don't want the exact same rules as the NFL, because, like, some of the NFL rules just aren't very good, honestly. But, we don't want to change stuff too drastically that isn't exactly wrong. So, like, we can get more, tape of a returner, for example, if they actually have to return the ball. Unlike NFL kickoff rules, where, just goes into just a touchback like 90% of the time. And, XFL kickoff rules, well, yeah, they're good at returning kicks with the XFL format, but the NFL doesn't use the XFL format. So, despite it being slightly less safe, I do kind of prefer them using the USFL kickoff format. So, yeah, like Cavante Turpin, really good return man. Same with Maurice Alexander, if we're using the 2022 USFL returners, for example. They're both in the NFL now. Maurice Alexander on the Lions and Cavante Turpin on the Cowboys. Cavante Turpin's made more of an impact for his team than Maurice Alexander on the Lions. But they both are examples of the USFL kickoff and, like, the returnman. That tape can actually help you get in the league. So, that's my take on the kickoff rule. Next thing I want to talk about, the punting rules, because I'm not really a fan of the punting rules. So, let's say you're a punter in the UFL. Well, actually, no, we'll start with you're a punter in the NFL. You're at the 50-yard line. You punt the ball. It's a bomb. Straight to the corner, goes out the 1-yard line at the corner. Other team gets the ball at the 1-yard line. You're a hero. You're getting hyped up, walking back to the sideline. Now, you do that same thing in the UFL. Any kick that goes behind the the returning team's 25-yard line and goes out of bounds, they will instead treat it like a touchback, and they will get the ball at the 25-yard line. I don't see what the point of that is. I mean, I guess it's a more entertaining product for the people watching, because, the offense gets the ball further down the field, resulting in, more scoring, usually. But, now you're just, the punters themselves are now getting punished for something that would be celebrated in the NFL. Like, that's a good NFL play if they manage to hit a quarter coffin punt to the 1-yard line out of bounds. But in the UFL, they're going to punish you for doing that and instead make you punt it directly to the returner, but giving them a chance to return the ball. Which, I guess, I was just talking about how returns like that can get the returners more tape, but, like, you still want to do that without actively punishing one side of the ball for something that wouldn't be punished in the NFL. That's one of the few areas where I think just using the NFL rule would just be better, because, one, the returner, when the ball is punted to them with the NFL rules, they can do a fair catch, they can return it, do whatever they want. And the punter still has the freedom of where they are on the field to go for pinning them down deep in their own territory with a corner coffin punt, and they won't be punished for it. So, personally, not a big fan of the punting rules for the UFL this season. Next up, we have the alternative option for the onside kick in the fourth quarter. But to my knowledge, this was in both the USFL and XFL. And, so reading directly from the fine print, while onside kicks are allowed at any time during the game, teams will have an alternate option to retain possession in the fourth quarter. If a team is tied or behind during the fourth quarter, they may elect to retain possession after a score with a 4th and 12 try from their own 28-yard line. I really like that rule because, well, the onside kick, while pulling off a successful onside kick is a very memorable moment. Like, it's a great moment for everyone involved. It happens so little of the time that people just expect it to not work. So, I feel like having an alternate option that is still pretty hard. You gotta get 13 yards, 12 yards minimum, if you want to convert it. There's still a high enough chance for that happening where, like, you could keep interest in games. Go back to that San Antonio-St. Louis game from the XFL last year, kind of like that. Like, if that was an NFL game, no one would have expected St. Louis to come back and win that with the time they had left on the clock, just because the onside kick doesn't work so much of the time that, like, most people would just tune out. With the 4th and 12 rule, St. Louis got it, ended up going down the field again and scoring another touchdown to win the game. You know, it creates a lot more excitement for the viewers. So that's one of the areas where I think the excitement for the viewers should be kept. Now, because that doesn't equally punish either side, because the defense still has an equal opportunity to make a stop. Unlike the punting rule, where a punter is kind of just forced to punt it directly to the returner, and they can't really go for a, like, effective quarter coffin punt. Like, here, it's not really actively punishing one side for something that they can't really control. So, I'm still a pretty big fan. I always have been, of the 4th and 12 rule. Now, a common theme of spring leagues is having a 2 forward pass rule. That's been a thing in almost every spring league I can remember. So, I mean, it doesn't get used too much, but we still have 2 forward passes are allowed if they're both performed behind the line of scrimmage. I think it's cool. Doesn't actually happen that much, but it's still a cool rule, personally. When it does happen, it usually looks pretty cool. So, I'm for it, but don't expect it to actually take place too much. Next thing, we have the what is a catch in the UFL. Now, this is notable because the USFL, you only need 1 foot in for a catch to count. The XFL, like the NFL, you need 2 foot in for a catch to count. So, the UFL is going to be going with 2 feet for a catch to count. And I feel like that's better because it's closer to the NFL rule. So, an NFL scout, they see a USFL wide receiver's highlight tape, and like half of their best catches only had 1 feet in. They're probably not going to look at that and be like, that seems like a guy we should sign, because half those catches wouldn't even have counted in the NFL. XFL receiver highlight tape, they're actually, all of their best catches, they're going to have 2 feet in. So they'd probably want someone like that over someone in the USFL who a lot of their best plays were only 1 foot in catches. So, personally, I feel like it's a good move by the league to use the 2 feet in rule instead of the 1 feet in rule. Some might say it's less entertaining, but I understand increasing the entertainment value in some parts, but not every part, because, the goal at the end of the day, we gotta remember, is to get these players back in the NFL. This is supposed to be more of a developmental league, so I think it's a pretty good move to make it a 2 feet in bounds catch rule, regulation, whatever you want to call it. This is more of a smaller one, but I just want to bring it up. Challenges in the UFL. I think it's weird, because you only get 1 challenge per game, which is a little weird, because if your challenge is successful, in the NFL, you would get a second challenge, and that was the same for the USFL, but in the UFL, you challenge a play result, your challenge is successful, you still don't get a second challenge. The only thing you gain is whatever you challenged being overturned, and also, you don't lose a timeout. If the challenge is unsuccessful, your thing is not overturned, and you lose a timeout. But even if your challenge is successful, you still don't get another challenge for the entire rest of the game, which I feel like you should get another challenge. Because, well, that's a little too punishing for something that shouldn't even be punishing. Like, your successful challenge also somehow punishes you for future challenges. So, I don't really like that rule that much, but I just think it's a little weird. But it's not, that big of a deal. Now, UFL overtime is going to be rather similar to USFL overtime, in which both teams will have 3 tries to score from their opponent's 5-yard lines, and they have 1 play to score. And they will alternate every time until either A, someone wins the best out of 3, or B, they both score on the same amount of best out of 3 plays. They keep going until someone fails to score. So, I rather like this overtime format. I like this overtime format better than the actual NFL overtime format, because the NFL overtime format, I guess you could say it's fairer, but it is rather long and drawn out and can be quite confusing at sometimes for people who don't pay attention to the NFL as much as other people do. So, I always liked the USFL overtime format because it's quick, simple, fair, and, it's rather easy to understand. So, I like they're bringing that back, personally. That's really all of the rules I wanted to cover for the UFL. So now I'm going to go into this short little segment that I would like to call the Speed Run Quick Topics, where I'm just going to cover a bunch of minute topics that don't have much substance to them, but I'm going to try and speed through them rather quickly. First thing I want to talk about, the UFL ball, because we know what that looks like now. The UFL ball is rather similar to the XFL ball from last season. We got the logo in silver on one side. We got the team logo, depending on who's using the ball at the time on offense. We got all that on the ball. Now, if I had to be nitpicky about the ball, I do think that we should have had more references to both leagues, because the ball is very similar to the XFL ball from last season. So it says XFL conference and USFL conference on the ball, but I feel like it would have been cool if we could have gotten like the stars on the ball that the USFL had, because, it's just a very XFL feeling ball, which most of the branding for the UFL has been rather XFL-y so far, but I feel like it would have been cool if we could have gotten the stars on the ball as a bit of a homage to the USFL. Just my opinion. Next thing I want to talk about, mascots. So, we have this weird situation now where 3 of the teams in the league have mascots and the other 5 don't. And it doesn't look like those XFL teams that didn't have mascots will be getting mascots. So, I don't really have much to add to that. I don't think those XFL teams will get mascots. I just think we're going to keep operating with 3 teams having mascots and 5 not having mascots. Because, not every NFL team has a mascot, and some do. So, it's not like uncommon for that to be a common practice. But I just thought it was kind of interesting how we ended up in that situation. Small topic 3, field art. So I have a feeling 6 of the teams are going to have just normal field art. We got the UFL logo in the center, and then, their word mark or logo or whatever they want in the end zone. I feel like the only ones that could be weird, depending on how Rice Stadium, how much they care about their end zone art, I don't really know. But I know some stadiums like that do seem to care a weirdly large amount. So we'll see if the Roughnecks field art ends up looking. We know the Defenders are still not going to have field art for their stadium because, DC United didn't want the any more football lines than necessary on their soccer pitch. So we know they're not going to have end zone art. It's still just going to be the blank end zone. And the one I think is kind of the funniest was going to be the Michigan Panthers. Because if I had to guess for the Michigan Panthers, if you watched the USFL last season, you would know that Ford Field had different end zone art than every other USFL stadium. Because they kept the Honolulu blue end zones for the Detroit Lions, but they had the USFL logo and like a white outline. So if I had to guess, the Michigan Panthers are probably going to have the Michigan Panthers word mark in Honolulu blue and white, which I just think that's kind of funny, because that barely matches their colors at all. So, nothing major about the field art. I just wanted to bring that up, because I just thought it was a little comedic, personally. Last of the quick speedrun topics, we had merch launch for the UFL about a day ago, and the merchandise for the UFL right now is a little scattered and all over the place. They got the game balls up for $175, and aside from that, they have a couple t-shirt designs, about 1 hoodie, a polo shirt, and the former USFL teams have hats, and the former XFL teams don't have hats. I imagine that the USFL was planning on releasing those hat designs before the merger happened, and they're just still releasing them now. So we'll see what happens with the XFL teams. I imagine they're going to get hats soon. And just something else I want to bring up. I know for the Defenders and Houston, the Roughnecks, both of their schedule t-shirts had dates wrong on them. For the Defenders, it was much more major. 7 of the dates were wrong on the Defenders t-shirt. And also someone else pointed out later, the Roughnecks schedule t-shirt, the last date on that shirt was also wrong. So I did check, as of today, those t-shirts are fixed. They have the right dates on them now, but I don't think they printed any with the wrong dates on them, I would imagine. If they did, those are some pretty high-value collector's items if they did, if anyone ends up getting sent those. But, yeah. So the merchandise, though, is a little lackluster at the moment, I will admit. The only shirts I really liked were the schedule t-shirts. Those are the only ones I really liked the design of. The helmet vintage t-shirts, I'm still not the biggest fan of. Wasn't a big fan of those in the USFL either. And aside from that, I don't really wear polo shirts ever, and I also don't like hats very much. So, not exactly very big on the merchandise right now. But I have heard that they will be adding more relatively soon. So, just to hold out a bit longer if you don't like any of the merchandise. Now I'm going to introduce a segment for future episodes of this show, It's not in the show right now, but for future episodes, I'm going to introduce it. This show is going to have a mailbag where you can mail in your own takes about the UFL. If you disagree with something I said, you can tell me how dumb I am in a take, and I will personally address it on the show. So, if you want to mailbag into the show into the future, you can DM the UFL Tribune, that is at the UFL Tribune, on Twitter, and just send it to our DMs, and I can't imagine we're getting that many mailbags, so if you send me anything, I will probably, review your take or your opinion on me or whatever you send in. Just keep it related to the UFL. Don't just send me like a picture of your dog or something. But yeah. So of course I don't have any mailbags today because this is episode 1 and you guys didn't even know that was a thing until just now. So for future episodes, you can mailbag in anything you want to talk about with the UFL. So keep that in mind. Be sure to mailbag in. That is, once again, send your mailbags to at the UFL Tribune on Twitter. And now I'm going to jump into the thing most of you are probably here for, and I just spent almost 30 minutes delaying before we actually got to it. The power rankings for the UFL this offseason, according to me. In 8th place, I have San Antonio. Reason I have San Antonio dead last in the power rankings is all of these teams, I would say, got better from last season's performance, obviously, because there's more talented players in the league, in a smaller league. So, of course, all of these teams, I think, got better. It's just San Antonio, I think, is the team that got better the least, per se, I guess. I mean, San Antonio's most flashy signing was a kicker, and not even just their most flashy signing was a kicker. The most flashy signing was a kicker in a league that kickers don't even see that much playing time in. So, yeah. Along with that, I mean, every team in the UFL right now has a pretty good quarterback, in my opinion. And San Antonio's quarterback battle right now is they don't have a clear-cut starter yet, but their quarterback battle is between the top 2 front runners being Quentin Normandy, who was with the Orlando Guardians last year, who played decently when he was on the field. He was the quarterback who started when the defender, when the Guardians got their 1 win versus the DC Defenders. That's why I got the names mixed up for a second there. But Quentin Normandy was not ever really good, but he was all right when he was on the field. And along with that, he is competing with Tom Flacco, Joe Flacco's brother, who went to Towson for college, and he was all right there. Tom Flacco, while at Towson, he threw for 3,237 yards in 2018 and then 2,831 yards in 2019. And in that 2018 season, he threw 27 touchdowns to 11 picks. 2019, it was 22 touchdowns to 6 picks. So he was all right at Towson. Towson's not exactly a very highly ranked school, but he was all right there. So Tom Flacco could be pretty good. We don't really know yet. I've never really seen Tom Flacco play before, but he does have the name advantage as he is related to a Super Bowl champion NFL quarterback. So talking about, people paying attention to the league because of big names, that's another one if Tom Flacco ends up starting. Some people might be like, Tom Flacco? Oh, I know his brother, Joe Flacco. Let's see how his brother does in a spring league. Someone's probably going to say that if he ends up starting. So I think that's pretty important, personally. But aside from the quarterback situation, I mean, San Antonio's defense is pretty good. I just don't see their offense being that incredible, personally. Because, I mean, no matter who starts at quarterback, I mean, I just don't think their offense is going to be that good. Their defense is probably going to get a lot of stops, but I feel like it's just going to be a situation of, the Pittsburgh Maulers in the USFL the last season, where, their defense is really good. It's just their offense. It took the Pittsburgh Maulers, 3 weeks to score an offensive touchdown. I just don't think their offense is going to be that talented, honestly. Next up on my power rankings in 7th, it is going to be the Arlington Renegades. It feels really weird to rank the reigning XFL champions this low on the list, but I kind of like the Brahmas. I think they got better. I just don't think they got as much better as everyone else. And I feel like first we got to bring up, they still have their quarterback from last season, Luis Perez, on the team, but it's not even clear if he's going to be starting exactly, because they also brought in Lindsey Scott at the quarterback position as well. And a lot of people do suspect that he might end up being the starter. So we don't really know how that's going to work out. I think Luis Perez should still be the starter if you're asking me. I mean, he just won the championship last season and was really good. But Lindsey Scott could also end up starting. Aside from the quarterbacks, though, I mean, they just don't really have that many, like, jump out at you players on the roster, personally, if you're asking me. They do have some, like, they have Donald Payne on the roster for the defensive side of the ball. If you are unaware, he was the 2022 USFL Defensive Player of the Year. And he was really good for the Gamblers on a team that was not very good overall, as they went 3-7, but he was really good for the team. But along with that, they also have Vic Beasley on their roster, so he should also be really good on defense. I feel like kind of like San Antonio. Their defense looks pretty good on paper, and their offense could be good. We have the question mark at quarterback of who's going to start there, but surrounding the quarterback, I just don't think they got that many offensive weapons, personally, to really help out their offensive situation. Also, side note thing I just want to bring up, they have Marquette King on the roster at punter. I just want to bring that up because I like punters. Next up in my power rankings, in 6th place, I have the Michigan Panthers. Michigan, as a team, I feel like they're not going to be terrible. They're just going to be pretty mediocre. I'm thinking like a 4-6 season for Michigan. First, I know I talk a lot about quarterbacks, but I always like starting with the quarterback of the team. Pretty important position. Their quarterback going into this season, E.J. Perry, who we'll see, he was pretty good in the 2 games he played last season. The 2 games he played last season were probably the most 2 important games of the Michigan Panthers season last year, with the game to get into the playoffs and the playoff game. And in those 2 games he did play, he played very well. We're just going to have to see if he continues to play at that high of a level, because if he does keep playing at that high of a level, they could be a better team overall. We just don't know if that's going to be the case. But along with E.J. Perry, they got Reggie Corbin at running back still, and also Matt Colbert from the Stars, who in limited play is pretty good. Both of the USFL seasons he played for the Stars, he always started the season pretty slow, but he picked up by the end of the season. So I feel like Reggie Corbin and Matt Colbert should be a pretty good duo at running back. And also, at receiver, they have some more former Stars. They got Devin Gray and Terry Wright. And along with that, they also got Jordan Sewell, a 3rd former Star. They just took all the Stars receivers for some reason. We did have some pretty good ones, though, I will admit. But also Marcus Sims. So, I feel like their offense, if E.J. Perry can play well, their offense can be pretty high-powered. And also Frank Gidna on defense, rating Defensive Player of the Year. I just don't know if anyone else on their defense is going to, pop out at you. Like, they got Frank Gidna, they got Breland Speaks, but, I feel like there's a lot of holes on the defense aside from those 2 players. So, the Panthers, depending on how well E.J. Perry plays and if their defense steps up, they could definitely rise in these power rankings. I just trust the 5 teams above them more, personally. And that will take us right into our 5th spot, the Houston Roughnecks. I think the Roughnecks are going to be pretty good. They have a pretty good roster on paper. Starting with the offense, they got the rating Offensive Player of the Year at running back in Mark Thompson. And they also have rather talented receivers in the 2 Isaiahs on their team, Isaiah Henny and Isaiah Zuber. Now, their question is more just, how good will Reed Sinnett be for this offense? Because I'm not saying Reed Sinnett's going to be bad. I just feel like the 4 teams above them all have set in stone. We know they're good quarterbacks, that's why I can't really rank Houston any higher. Mainly just because we don't know how good Reed Sinnett's going to be. So I trust in the teams above this, like, Memphis, DC, Birmingham, St. Louis. We know their quarterbacks are really good. So it's more just a question mark. Again, like Michigan, they could very easily go higher in these rankings when the season actually starts. But for right now, I have them in 5th. Because, their offense, aside from the question mark at quarterback, the offense is pretty good on paper. The Roughnecks' defense has never really been a joke. The defense for the Roughnecks has always been really good. They had the Defensive Player of the Year 2022. And, they still have Chris O'Donnell on the defense. He's always been really good. So, the Roughnecks' defense should be good. Their offense could be really good. Just depends on how well Reed Sinnett performs. Also, just keep in mind, if Reed Sinnett performs poorly, you will see Mark Thompson on Twitter talking about how he wishes he could play quarterback and running back. I'm just telling you now. 4th place on my power rankings, I have the Memphis Showboats. With their almost not entirely new-look offense, but pretty new-look offense, They got at quarterback now. They have my favorite spring football player, Case Cookus, at quarterback. Also at running back, they have Darius Victor. Big addition, really good for the Generals. They did go 3-7, but he was the offensive player of the year for the USFL back in 2022 and was still pretty good for the Generals 2023 despite the team's poor record. Along with that at receivers, they got Vinny Papali, they got DeAndre Overton. Case Cookus and DeAndre Overton already have a bit of connection from their previous time with the Stars. The last Stars touchdown that will be scored for the time being was actually Case Cookus to DeAndre Overton in that Week 10 game versus Michigan. That's pretty cool. So Memphis' offense should be really good, and their defense could be really good. It just more depends on how well their players, play. Wow, that's such insightful commentary for me right there. If their players are good, the defense will be good. Wow, incredible. On the defensive side of the ball for the Showboats, they have Jordan Ferguson, Vontae Diggs, and Christian McFarland, all very good defensive players. I just don't think their defense is going to be as good as the teams I have above them. Their offense, though, should be very high-powered. I also somehow completely forgot to mention Derek Dillon when I was going through their wide receivers. So, they have a very high-powered offense. And also, I haven't really mentioned coaches yet, but also new head coach, Todd Haley's out, Larry Fedora's in. Todd Haley was not a great head coach. Larry Fedora is, proven to be a pretty good head coach. So, the Showboats should be pretty good. Next up on my power rankings, I have the St. Louis Battlehawks. If this power rankings list would have been made a couple days ago, St. Louis would have been much further down. But as you know, because I mentioned it earlier in the show, obviously, A.J. McCarron is back for the Battlehawks, which shot them up this list, in my opinion. So aside from A.J. McCarron, they still have very good receivers on offense in Hakeem Butler, Jaquir Pearson, and Darius Shepard. And, the only area I see their offense struggling is they don't really have a very standout running back for their team. But aside from running back, their offense should be stacked. And on the defensive side of the ball, St. Louis is stacked on that side too. They got Freedom. I still can't pronounce that guy's last name to this day. At defensive end, they got Kevin Atkins. They got Drayvon Askew Henry, Nico Bolden. All of those guys were very good for the Battlehawks last year. So I'd imagine that, unless they somehow got worse, so the Battlehawks defense is going to be really good. Their offense also going to be really good. I just feel like, two teams above them, it's more the defensive side. I think the Stallions and Defenders have better defenses than St. Louis, and also the running backs too, because St. Louis, in my opinion, they don't really have an amazing running back, so that's why they're ranked third, below our final two teams. Coming in second is the DC Defenders. This Defenders team is loaded at about every position you can imagine. On the offensive side of the ball, we have Jordan Teamu at quarterback. He was the Offensive Player of the Year in the XFL last year. Along with that, we have the reigning XFL number 1 overall pick, Abram Smith. And then at wide receiver, they got Chris Blair. They got Lucky Jackson. All of these guys are very good on offense. Defensive side, they're just as stacked with David Bellamy. They also got Michael Joseph. And coming over from the Pittsburgh Ballers, they also have Boogie Roberts on this defense now. So this defense, they can stop the run, they can stop the pass. I don't know what they can't stop. The DC Defenders could very easily find themselves back in the championship game, just like last year. It more just comes down to, can Jordan Teamu play at his maximum potential for the entire season and not just stall out in the championship like last year or the first 3 games. So, yeah, the DC Defenders, very good team. Not even being biased as I am a Defenders fan. They are just actually really good. But number 1 on my power rankings, how could it be anyone else? It is the Birmingham Stallions, the back-to-back USFL champions. Starting off at quarterback, they have Jamar Smith starting most likely. That man has proven he can win games. He has only ever lost 1 as a starter. But even after Jamar, they got CJ Marable coming back as running back. He was a very good running back last year. 525 rushing yards, 3 rushing touchdowns. He was 4th in the league in yards, tied for 6th in the league with rushing touchdowns. Also had 235 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns. And as a returnman, too, he had 319 kick return yards. He was very good as a running back and returner for the Stallions. And then we got to get into the wide receivers, because they got the reigning USFL Championship MVP in Dion Kane returning, along with Victor Bolden coming back. They also have previous defender Chris Lacey coming to the Stallions. And then we got to get to the defense, in which they have Chris Orr, and they also have the 2022 USFL interceptions leader in Channing Stribling. Can't forget JoJo Tillery at safety. He was really good. And You think I was going to leave this guy out of the defensive rundown? Of course I'm not. Scooby Wright, who's actually going to be playing this year instead of being stuck on IR for almost the entire season. So, the Stallions team, very scary. Along with even their backups are scary. I just looking through the roster now to fact check stuff. I also forgot to list off Bo Scarborough for the running backs too. So CJ Marable and Bo Scarborough, quite a scary combination. So the Stallions, I don't know if they're going to go undefeated this year. I mean, they almost did 2 seasons in a row. I actually don't think they're going to go undefeated. I just said I didn't know if they were or not. I don't think they're going to go undefeated. I could very much see them in the running to get their third straight championship, though, because that team is stacked beyond belief. It is almost, as you call it, a super team. So, yeah, Birmingham firmly number one in the preseason power rankings. And with that, that'll pretty much conclude our opening episode of the UFL Tribune. So, I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to come back next time if you did enjoy. Mailbag in if you want to tell me things about how dumb I am for my power rankings or something. I don't know. And I will see you for another episode at some point. There might be one more episode before the season starts. But the next episode could very well be right before the season starts, where I'm making game picks for season 1 and stuff. So, or not season 1, week 1. So yeah, we'll see. I'll see you whenever I see you next. So yeah, thanks for listening to the first episode of the UFL Tribune, and I will see you for the next episode.